Welcome in to MISL Weekly. My name's Nicholas Murray. A little bit of a sore throat this week, but I'm very pleased to be joined by Chris Economides. Chris, how was your weekend? You got up to travel around the Northeast, see a couple of games. Must have been a pretty good one for you.
It was very enjoyable. There's nothing like fall up in the Northeast with the leaves changing. But no, saw a couple of really good matches, including the franchise opener for the Pennsylvania Roar. And then the following night I was up in Rochester. Great crowd in Rochester. Not quite the result that the Lancers would have hoped for, but all in all, it was a very successful opening weekend for the MISL.
Absolutely, and I mean, we had three very interesting games, the highlight of which, of course, was on Saturday night. The Milwaukee Wave go in to face the Missouri Comets, sold-out arena at the Independence Events Center, and Ian Bennett has a career night. I mean, 11 points, 5 goals, leads the Wave back from a 6-point deficit with less than 3 minutes to go. Absolutely phenomenal stuff from the Canadian Futsal International.
Yeah, I mean, that obviously was the marquee game of the weekend. As you mentioned, a sellout crowd in Kansas City, tremendous atmosphere. The broadcast, by all accounts, was just phenomenal, HD quality. And in terms of the game, pretty much the same old story here. One of the teams jumps out to a big lead. Other team comes back late in the match, ties it, and then wins it in overtime. Kudos to both teams, but especially to Milwaukee. They just hung tough the whole game. Tie it up with 6 points in the last 2.5 minutes, and then Ian Bennett gets the game winner in overtime. It's a great way to start the season.
What does it say about the Wave typically the Wave in the last couple of seasons have been a team that's tried to slow the game down, grind out results, certainly rely on their defensive ability to stifle the other side. The fact that they were able to come back and win in a shootout like this, does that indicate maybe a little bit of a shift in what this team might be able to do? Because in last season, certainly, it felt as though there were times where the Wave would get behind and they'd be able to come back. But against teams like Baltimore, against teams like Missouri, if they fell behind, they wouldn't necessarily be able to rally as strongly as we saw them do on Saturday.
I think a lot of credit has to go to Keith Tozer. Again, the senior member of the MISL coaching ranks. Great job keeping his team focused. They were down early in the game. And great job in also getting that team a little bit younger, I believe, this year. He made some nice key additions. He's gotten younger. Again, they're one of the top teams in the league. But arguably could be the team to beat again. But I think you got to give a lot of credit to Keith, and not only his roster reshuffling during the off season, but and also how he kept his troops poised and came back, was able to tie it with the sixth attacker, and then win it in overtime.
Now, on the flip side of that, Missouri. This is, I think, a tough loss for them because we looked at them at the beginning of last season and they won a game like this against Milwaukee. They came back, they won in overtime at the very start of last season, and there was a certain amount of optimism that with all the firepower that this Comets team had, that they were going to be able to improve defensively, shore things up at the back because they weren't the greatest defensive side last year. This is probably a tough one to take because they were hoping that with a 6-point lead, you were hoping that your defense would hold up in that final 3 minutes, make sure you come away with a win and send that capacity crowd home happy.
Yeah, I mean, obviously a loss like that hurts, but again, it's 1 of 20. There weren't a lot of exhibition games during the course of the preseason, so obviously this was the first game for both teams. There's got to be some mistakes. There's got to be some shortcomings. Both teams showed that. But again, I thought it was a great game. And I think both teams will be there come playoff time, and it's going to be a really, really interesting regular season, Nicholas.
Well, hopefully we'll get a few more games like that out of these two as the season goes on.
I'll tell you what, if we had all the games like that, we'd have a much bigger, a great. We got a great league anyways. But that game again, Milwaukee, Kansas City, Milwaukee, Baltimore, Baltimore, Milwaukee, all those. Rochester, Syracuse should be a great series this weekend. It was just a great game.
Now, speaking of Syracuse, they were a team that had a preseason scrimmage. They went out and they took a scrimmage win against a Baltimore Blast squad that Danny Kelly was taking. It sounded like he was looking at a few players in that game the week before the season began. But Syracuse seemed to have built a little bit of chemistry, and then they came out and they handled their business very nicely on the road against the Pennsylvania Roar. You were at that game in person. What was the biggest thing that you saw out of Syracuse? What impressed you most about the way that they took that victory?
Number 23, Michelle Millwood.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Syracuse has been known for their sort of run-and-gun style. I think Millwood's going to add an element that they may have lacked in. I mean, they had an Andre Budny in the past. But obviously, Millwood's a class of his own in terms of the MISL. Great addition. I think he had the first goal of the season for the Silver Knights. But again, Tommy Tanner's done a great job to keep the nucleus of that team together. He's made some really nice additions, a.k.a. Millwood. But again, I think that Syracuse is an improved club this year and is going to be right there on the cusp also.
No, it was Canado Forbes who got that opening goal of the season off a very nice assist from Neto in 12 seconds into the game. But I
missed that when I was actually going to my seats. I know that Millwood.
It was a blink and you'll miss it goal.
Well, after my illustrious opening kick there, I was just headed to my seats and I missed the first.
We do
goal,
need to talk about this because Chris, I've seen a number of opening kicks in my time, and I'm not sure I've seen many that were quite so futile. What happened there?
And I've been a little bit under the weather, Nicholas, not to make excuses here. But that was not one of my better efforts. Thank you to Glenn Goldstein and Andrew Haynes for having me out there. It was an honor to be out there. And I let the fans that were in attendance, and obviously my cohorts here at the headquarters, I let everybody down with, as you mentioned, the futile effort as it pertained to my opening kickoff there.
However, let's go back to Michael Millwood, because, yes, I thought it was interesting to me that he had a very interesting game. He was the guy that stood out to you, and yet he wasn't the guy who was filling up the score sheet. And I think that's what he's actually has the chance to do for Syracuse. They have guys that can score goals there. We saw Neto last year. We saw Slavisa Ubiparapovic come up with a hat-trick in this opening game. Nelson Santana with a couple of goals, including a very nice finish on the power play late in the second quarter. But Millwood, he's going to get his goals, he's going to get his assists, but he's also going to do all of those little things off the ball that's going to create the space for those other guys and create more scoring opportunities for them. And it's definitely interesting to me that you pointed out him as being the decisive factor when there were other guys that were out there having statistically better games, but he's the guy that kind of maybe the glue that holds that forward line together.
Well, I mean, obviously, Michelle Millwood has been in the league for a while, a marquee player in this league, and that's an attribute, that he brings to the table, is that he makes all the other players around him better, and I think that's what he's added to this Syracuse roster. Also, another key addition / comeback was the other kid, Corey
Elenio.
Elenio played very, very well, created all kinds of havoc on Pennsylvania, was all over the floor. Had a great game. So I think, again, those two additions from a Syracuse perspective are going to make a world of difference.
Now, Millwood's former side, the Baltimore Blast, the defending champions, obviously we were talking last week about how the Blast were going to need players to step up and step into those shoes, especially some of the younger guys who were getting acclimated to the game, getting acclimated to the way the Blast played last year. That certainly came to fruition on Saturday night. You have Marco Mangione, the son of former Blast player Nick Mangione, go out, score his first hat-trick in his short MISL career. And then you have the other guys go out and continue to fill up the score sheet, while at the other end, Pat Healy, Mike Lookingland, and William Van Zela are doing the job that they need to do to contain, obviously, a very good Lancers attack. It was a very, very impressive win, I thought, by the Blast to open the defense of their title.
Well, first off, congratulations to the Lancer organization. Great crowd, great atmosphere. Rich Randall and Sam Fantuzzo continue to do just an outstanding job there. I mean, there was one thing going on after another. I mean, you didn't have a moment's chance to relax or what. I mean, not relax. It was just an enjoyable atmosphere. Great crowd. Baltimore's, the cream always rises to the top. Rochester came out, and I saw a bunch of Elliot Fauski Tomahawks in the crowd. That's a major marketing piece of the Lancers this year. And lo and behold, he scores the first goal. Place is going absolutely bonkers. But then Baltimore, in true champion fashion, came back, settled things down, got the equalizer, and then ultimately took control of the game. A key aspect, as I had mentioned in our preseason, or in our podcast last week, was going to be the addition of Pat Hannigan. And Pat Hannigan played an outstanding game, I thought, from a Lancers perspective. Obviously, not having Mauricio Salas in the lineup hurt. From what I've been told, he's out 2 to 4 weeks with a knee injury. So that obviously had to hurt. But overall, again, a great game. Baltimore, the champions that they are, found a way to come back and get the W.
On the plus side for Rochester, good for them to see Andrew Hoxie get back and get a couple of goals in his return to the side. But for Baltimore now, they have the marquee game of this weekend. They host the Milwaukee Wave for their home opener on Saturday night. That's going to be a huge game, and it should be a fascinating game with the way that these two sides are now setting up against one another.
Yankees, Red Sox, Bruins, Canadians, Cowboys and the Giants, the Rhinos in Montreal. You can take your pick of just natural rivalries. It doesn't get much better than the Blast and the Wave. Obviously, been in the league for many, many years. Met in the finals I don't know how many times. And these games never get old to watch. I'm sure there's going to be some fireworks. I'm sure it should be an interesting matchup. And what a great way for Baltimore to open their home campaign facing their arch rivals, the Wave.
Well, to talk a little bit about that, and to get some more perspective on his big game this past week, we spoke with the Milwaukee Wave's Ian Bennett, and that'll be coming up just after this break.
Well, we're very pleased to be joined by this week's MISL Player of the Week, Ian Bennett of the Milwaukee Wave. Ian, first of all, congratulations on the award, and congratulations on the 11-point night against the Comets. From an outside perspective, that was a remarkable game to watch. What was it like being part of?
It wasn't bad, actually. It was kind of a crazy game. We started off kind of weak, and they came out firing. It was a sold-out crowd, and they really wanted to take it to us. They really wanted to beat us, and we just honestly thought about how we got knocked off in the semifinals against them, and we came back twice, and it was a great game for the fans and everyone to watch.
Was that playoff game a big motivation for you guys after the way that you had gotten eliminated from the playoffs last spring?
Yeah, it was tough, man. It was the way we lost, too. A couple restarts, a couple home goals. It was just a bad way to lose a playoff game like that. So it was really tough.
To come back from 6 points down with less than 3 minutes to go, what do you think that says about the Wave and the squad that you've been able to not just retain for this season, but also some of the new guys you've been able to bring in?
Well, it definitely shows that we got some courage and we got some fight in us. But obviously, you don't want to be down and you don't have to come back every time when you're playing indoor. Because the good teams, and they're very normally, I'm sure next time they'll shut it down and won't give us another chance to get back into it. But it shows that we got character and we got guys that don't give up and we keep our composure, which was great to see.
You do have some new faces on the team this year with guys like Carlos Munoz, Justin McKinney coming into the lineup, and some absentees with Joe Hammes and Josh Reif departing. How do you feel the makeup of the squad is this year in comparison to the last couple of seasons?
Well, obviously we lost a lot of the veterans now, and it's almost like a new era coming in. We got a lot of young kids that can actually move and play, so they're fired up, but they still got to obviously learn the game. And it's a tough game to catch on if you can't learn it. But they're coming on strong. I like them. I like the energy they bring. Practice has been more intense now with them in there because obviously they have a fight and they have a will to train hard. And it just helps the veterans out too because it pushes us too. So it keeps us on our toes.
You mentioned that this is kind of a new era for the team. You have a new ownership group coming in. You've got a new team logo, new uniforms. What's that been like to be part of that transition from last season to this?
So sometimes it's good, but sometimes obviously it's scary because sometimes you're used to one thing and everything's kind of going smoothly, and then it all just suddenly stops, and then it's a whole new ownership, whole new logo, whole new uniform, and everything. It's just a thing where you just got to kind of adapt to it, and then hopefully it goes well. And so far, so good. It's been going pretty good right now. So you just got to keep hoping and just keep working hard and make sure the product is very good on the field, so that way there's no excuses. So and make sure they're taking care of their stuff in the office, which they are. So it's a good time right now to be in Milwaukee.
You mentioned the fact that this feels like it's a more attacking team than in previous seasons. What's for you? This has the potential to definitely be a career season. Does it feel like you have that opportunity to put up big numbers this year?
Yeah, well, to me, the numbers are great, but obviously I'm here to win. And honestly, I'd rather win games. I'd rather win games like 12-4, 12-1, 12-2. You know, I don't want them scoring too much. You know, we don't really work on our defense. I don't want to be like we can score. If they score one, then we'll score two. You know, I don't want to get into kind of games like that because then it starts to be in a shootout. Obviously, the fans love it and it's great for the game, but to really play defense and to limit to a team where they can only score like 2 goals, 3 goals a game, that tells a lot about a team that they're willing to defend. And honestly, I've been a champion twice, and honestly, that's what it takes to win championships. Like, if you're a running gun team, you'll have success at the start, but in the long run, that doesn't work. You always win championships with defense. And that's what I always try to preach, and that's what coach tries to preach to us. And that really wins championships. I got 2 rings because of that, so.
You guys obviously have a big game this weekend after last weekend's clash with the Comets. The Baltimore Blast going to visit them. Their home opener, and they looked really solid in their win against Rochester this weekend. Are you looking forward to getting back and getting on the field and kind of renewing that rivalry?
Oh, it's a massive game. This is like Man U Chelsea. This is a big game. This is the big stage. Like, if you can play good against this team, then you know you're a good player. You got some respect because they're going to bring it, and they're definitely very efficient. They're technically sound. They got a good coach. They got very good players. They actually got one of my buddies on that team, Max Burnett, so I always like playing against him. But they got a very good team. They got very dangerous players, and then they can play. And that's the thing. If they get up to a lead, they're really not going to let you back in the game. So we got to make sure we keep the game close. It's going to be a hostile environment. They're going to have their crazy fans there, and it's just going to be a great atmosphere. And I can't wait to be a part of it.
They obviously have 2 very, very solid defenders. I'm sure you'll be seeing a lot of Mike Lookingland this weekend. What's the biggest challenge going up against a guy like that?
Well, he's a veteran, so he sees all the moves. He knows the runs. He knows how to play, so he anticipates a lot. So honestly, to tell you the truth, the main thing against a guy like a great defender like Mike Lookingland is you just got to try and maybe outwork him a little bit and make sure you keep him on his toes and make him work for everything. Because a guy like him, he is going to play good, and it's going to be tough. So you can't get frustrated if you can't get by him, you get stopped by him, or you just got to keep going through the motion. You got to keep playing, got to keep staying the course, and you try to have success. You know, maybe catch him sleeping one time, maybe he's napping because he is getting a little older too, which is always good. So that helps out too.
Well, Ian, we're really looking forward to the game this Saturday. Congratulations on the great performance this last weekend against the Comets, and best of luck for the rest of the season.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Now, obviously, Milwaukee and Baltimore, Ian Bennett and Mike Lookingland, that should be a marquee matchup this weekend, this Saturday night, and so much to look forward to in that game. But there's a lot of good games on this weekend's schedule as far as the MISL is concerned. We have, as you mentioned earlier in the show, the home-and-home series between Rochester and Syracuse, and these 2 teams have had a great rivalry. Syracuse held the edge in last year's series. I think they may have swept the Lancers, and so Rochester will be looking to try and put that right. What are you looking for out of this game, and are we going to, if we can, is Syracuse going to build on that opening victory against Pennsylvania?
Well, it's the war on I-90. I'm going to go back to my upstate New York roots here. But those two games this weekend should be a lot of fun for the fans. Hopefully we'll have a lot of interaction with fans going back and forth. Since the cities are only 70 miles apart, and going back to watch each team's play in their home venue. Friday night, Syracuse's home opener. Saturday, the Lancers get a chance to redeem themselves before their home fans. I think that's got to be a really, really fun couple of games. In their short 2-year tenures in the MISL, I think every game that these guys have played has been it's had, with Billy Andrecki and Tommy Tanner the first year, then obviously last year with some of the gut-wrenching defeats, that the Lancers had. It essentially cost them a playoff spot last year. So I'm really curious to see how these two games materialize.
It definitely will be. I mean, the games between the Lancers and the Silver Knights last year were particularly good. I remember one game where I believe it was Marcos Chantel had the game winner very late on for Syracuse. And there were some classic games that were played. Certainly should be very exciting Friday night and Saturday night as they play the home-and-home series. In addition to that, we get to see the debut of the St. Louis Ambush this weekend. They've got 2 home games, starting off with a game against the Pennsylvania Raw Friday night. But I'm really interested to see how they match up with the Missouri Comets on Saturday. This is on paper, looks like a pretty solid team. You've got Jeff Ritchie in goal, you've got some experienced indoor players coming into this, and you've got some interesting local players like Michael Rourke, former New England Revolution player, going to be playing indoor for the first time. It'll be interesting to see if they can hold firm defensively against what obviously is a very potent Comets attack.
Yeah, I mean, that should be... I mean, I'm really excited about going to St. Louis this weekend. I'll be there for both games. Obviously, their franchise opener Friday night, and talking with owner Andrew Haynes. I know they're expecting really good crowds for both matches. Should have in excess of 6,000, if not more, for Friday night, and then over 5,000 for the Comets game on Saturday night. Both matches, I think, are very, very intriguing. I think, especially the one on Saturday night, where you're rekindling the old St. Louis-Kansas City rivalry. You're going back to the old MISL days, the Comets and I believe it was the St. Louis Storm, and now, the Ambush. I know that when I was in Kansas City, we used to have a lot of fans going back and forth for those matches. Tremendous rivalry between both cities. So that should be a really fun weekend in St. Louis.
Yeah, I was going to say, with the amount of support the Comets have, as we saw this past weekend, you can imagine that there might be 500... You could easily imagine 500 Missouri fans showing up in St. Louis this weekend and giving their boys the support that they deserve.
No, I wholeheartedly hope for that. It should make for a really fun atmosphere. But Andrew's done a great job there. And you talk about soccer legends. Not that we're talking about soccer legends, but what a great coaching choice in Daryl Duran. I think Daryl Duran's going to give that team instant credibility. He's put together a really good roster. It's very well documented that the St. Louis market has a lot of great homegrown talent. I think he's done an excellent job of bringing in some key veterans that have played in the MISL, like a Jamar Beasley, like Jeff Ritchie in goal, and then he's got that local talent pool to choose from also. So again, I think that St. Louis is going to be right there with the rest of the teams. And again, as I mentioned, it should be a fun weekend. It's
going to be interesting to see how they fare against the Raw as well, because this is a Raw team that, from my perspective, yes, they fell behind early and they fell into a pretty deep hole against Syracuse. I think they were down 10-2 at one point. But it seemed as the game went on, and they changed things up a little bit tactically. They started pressing a little higher, started putting Syracuse under a little more pressure. And it seemed that kind of got them on even footing with the Silver Knights, especially in the second half. I thought they played a very solid second half, and there's a chance here that we might see a progression from that against the St. Louis side that obviously will be playing together for the first time. So it'll be. I think it's good for both teams, because Pennsylvania will be coming in with the chance to build on a good second half. It'll be good for St. Louis, because obviously they want to get a game in before they face the challenge of a team like the Comets, which obviously are very, very powerful indeed.
Well, I mean, Pennsylvania, as you mentioned, I thought they came out really flat. how you come out flat for your franchise opener.
I think that was actually maybe a tactical decision. It certainly seemed like it was a conscious decision to drop 5 players back in their own half. Don't press. Try and keep a defensive shape. The problem was it didn't really work because the Silver Knights were still able to drop passes into Neto, drop passes into Millwood over the top, and those guys were then able to hold up possession and find the seams for Ubi Parapovic and others to get shots on goal. I think when they started pressing higher up the field, it seemed like it happened midway through the second quarter. That's when they started finding success. That's when they started forcing turnovers. That's when they started creating scoring opportunities for themselves. If they're able to continue that and able to press at opportune moments against the ambush, then they certainly could succeed. Certainly create some 2-on-1s. Certainly create some good scoring opportunities.
I think Pennsylvania is going to be more of the, and we use the word for the first time this year, more of the stereotypical expansion franchise. Where they're going to make a lot of mistakes. You could even see on some of their line changes that they weren't quite in sync. They had a couple of bench minors for some changes. So again, that's just an acclimation period to the indoor game. Yeah, they've got the ageless wonder in Peter Pappas in goal, who I thought was phenomenal Friday night. They got Chris Williams, they've got Tom Myers. So they've got a smattering of Pete Rowley, of ex MISL players, but it takes time to build. It takes time to be more cohesive, and I think that Pennsylvania will probably have a little bit more of an acclimation period than say a St. Louis, who has somebody like a Daryl Duran that's been through the wars before per se, and knows the game. And it's got a little bit more of an indoor feel to it.
Well, I'm sure they'll be hoping for an accelerated acclimation process before the Milwaukee Wave come to visit them on Sunday afternoon. That certainly a very, very big test to wrap up the weekend for the Raw. However, all of these games can be seen this weekend on YouTube through the team's channels. You can keep an eye out for that. As we mentioned previously, Friday night, Rochester visits Syracuse, and Pennsylvania visits St. Louis. Then Saturday night, we have the Milwaukee Wave visiting the Baltimore Blast. The return fixture between Rochester and Syracuse, that one at the Blue Cross Arena in Rochester. And then the Missouri Comets going to visit the St. Louis Ambush before Sunday's afternoon matinee in Pennsylvania as the Wave complete their weekend road trip up to the Northeast against the Raw. We hope you enjoy all of the action this weekend. Chris, what are you watching for? What's the game you have to watch this weekend?
Well, obviously, everybody's going to think, Milwaukee, Baltimore, and obviously I'll be watching that as I'm watching the St. Louis and Missouri game live. But again, I think I'm really intrigued by the home and home matchup between Rochester and Syracuse. Again, every time these two teams face each other, it's always some sort of dramatic win, one team or the other. It's always got some sort of intrigue to it, and that's the couple of games that I'll be keeping a special close eye on.
Yeah, when you have a weekend that has Baltimore, Milwaukee involved in it, it's kind of can suck all of the air out of the rest of the schedule. But I've got to say, Saturday night's game between St. Louis and Missouri, that could be the start of a very, very good rivalry. And I think while the fans are certainly going to tune into Baltimore, Milwaukee Saturday night, once that game's over, make sure you flick over to this one, because I think that thing's got all the makings of being very, very special. Not just this season, but for seasons down the line. Certainly could be very exciting. All of the games, as I mentioned, on YouTube. Thank you, Chris, so much for joining me this week.
My pleasure. As always, Nicholas, I hope you feel better next week. You're being the content professional that you are. You got through the broadcast, even with your cup of tea here. So hope you feel better next week.
Thank you to producer Seth for putting all of this together. Thank you for listening, and we hope you join us this time next week for a special Thanksgiving edition of MISL Weekly. Until then, bye for now.